Thanks for being with us. We are the grower of Champagne Philippe Blavier.
Our estate is located in Cramant, part of Côte des Blancs.
We work on 4.6 hectares with 52 different plots located in the 4 villages, which are Cramant, Avise, Auger, and Le Mesnil-sur-Auger.
I manage the vineyard and the winery.
We work together at the blending time, and I manage the business and the marketing part. The passion of champagne has been inherited from generation to generation.
I am the 3rd generation.
And I am the 13th generation of wine grower in Champagne. We produce around 25,000 bottles per year. Our estate is HVE level 3, it's this. That means we respect the environment, the biodiversity, the soil, the humanity. No herbicide nor insecticide products and less use of chemical products. We plow our soil since 9 years. The harvest of the plots in Cramant, Avise, Auger, and Le Mesnil-sur-Auger is done and pressed separately to develop the distinctive features of each terroir. Each terroir expresses itself by microvinification. Our winery has a lot of small tanks, thermoregulated, to keep the specificities of each terroir all along the vinification.
The blend of the different cuvées with the 4 terroirs is done just before the bottling at the springtime.
Like this, you could have an idea of who we are and what we make. We can speak a little about our angel, which is our emblem. We choose it because we like the angels in general. And when we created the label, we wanted to have a symbol, our guardian angel, who protects us and our estate. I draw it.
Oh, sorry. And now we can speak about our cuvées. They are all Grand Cru, 100% of Chardonnay.
Before the disgorgement, we always do 3 different tries to test which level of sugar will be the most interesting for the cuvée. All our cuvées are in extra brut, less than 6 grams by liter. I will start with La Grâce d'Alphaël, extra brut, main harvest 16 with 23% of reserve wine. It's our main cuvée. It's a blend of the 4 villages, Cramant, Avise, Auger, Le Mesnil-sur-Auger. There's no recipe. In function of the year, we could decide which percentage of each village we will put to maintain the taste and the spirit of the cuvée. Right now, the dosage is 5 grams. And with this dosage, we have a nice balance between minerality and fruity taste. It's a champagne for after work, time for relaxation, ideal for aperitif. The texture is fluid and firm. The nose is on the fruit, ripe pear, subtle and elegant, and a rich mineral essence. We also have a good balance between minerality, salty, and freshness. On the mouth, white flowers and citrus fruit on the finish. The food pairing could be ceviche of monkfish, red mullet with lemon, or oyster. It exists in extra brut and also in zero dosage. We also have 2 other cuvées 100% Chardonnay Grand Cru, La Grâce d'Acamia and Genesis, with a proportion of the 4 terroirs different to highlight other nuances of Chardonnay from the Côte des Blancs.
Now the vintage range.
Our farming practice allowed us to increase our knowledge of the 4 terroirs. For these 3 vintages, we wanted to share with you the special emotions felt during the process of vinification and recognize the typicity of each terroir. We will start with Émotion 2012, Extra Brut, the Four Terroirs.
On voit pas bien, ouais.
It's time of pure emotion. There is no need for a pretext to live an exceptional moment. So Émotion 2012 combines the excellence of the year 12 with a complex aroma of our vines in Cramant, Avise, Auger, and Le Mesnil-sur-Auger. This champagne is animated by fine and bright bubbles that feed a persistent chord. The first nose is gourmand, and the signature is mineral. We are on the roasted brioche with aromas of dried fruits. The attack on the mouth brings the fat and the amplitude, as well as a beautiful minerality that influences the length. The food pairing could be toast of smoked salmon or caviar. Another vintage, Cramant Émotion 2013, Extra Brut. It's time for a cool and chic meeting. This unique terroir is brought to light in a golden dress with fine effervescence, typical from Cramant. Its deep yellow gold color and bright is supported by very fine bubbles and creamy. Its nose is wide, generous, and gourmand. We find slivered almond with pastry taste. The mouth is creamy, grapefruit nuts, ripe peach, and fresh butter. Also brioche nuts, just out of the oven. This wine has a nice minerality and creamy taste, typical from Cramant. The food pairing could be grilled lobster on the barbecue. Now it's the end for barbecue, but could be nice. And the last one, Mesnil-Émotion 2013, the Consécration in French. This champagne accompanies an important moment. It is rich, its effervescence dominates, its texture is full and firm, and its aromatic expression is often mature. The terroir of Mesnil expresses itself with salty, minerality, freshness, nice structure, straight wine. The discovery of a unique terroir that will delight connoisseurs. The food pairing could be monkfish with smoked bacon, grilled John Dory, accompanied with light smoked notes.
If you test Cramant Émotion 2013 and Mesnil-Émotion 2013, you will completely understand the incidence of the terroir on the wines. The both vintage Chardonnay, 6 kilometers from one to another, and such differences of the taste. That's all for the cuvée. We have done a radar where you can find at which moment of the day or of the year you can have a glass of champagne Philippe Blavier with all different cuvées we produce.
Now we can speak about this year, 2020. Winter was wet and not very cold. April was really warm, like in summer. As summer was really warm also and dry, grapes were small and full of aromas. For us, harvest started on August the 27th in Le Mesnil-sur-Auger. To obtain the best maturity, we have decided to wait a few days after the opening dates of picking. As the quality of the grape were super safe, it was a good decision to wait. Aromas were very intense, fruity, great balance between sugar and acidity. So the juices are really promising. Of course, we need to wait until winter time to see the evolutions of the wines. That's all for our explanation. You can follow us on Facebook and Instagram, Champagne Philippe Glavier, and take care of you.
Take care.
Thank
You
you
have a
very much.
question?
Thank you very much,
You're
Philippe
welcome.
and Veronique. Didier is here. Didier.
Yes.
Aha.
Hello,
You
Didier.
are.
Hello, Philippe. Hello. Hello, Véronique. Hello, Gabe. Hello,
Hello.
Abby. Hello, everybody.
Thank you for joining us, Didier.
You have long hair.
It's the COVID haircut.
Yeah, I understand.
No haircut. Yeah.
Is it good for me because I don't see my face on the computer?
Let me see. Abby, could you stop sharing for just a second? Let's see. There he is. So Didier, here we are. There you are. Perfect. Can you see yourself?
Merde.
Okay. Perfect.
Okay.
So we're talking now with Didier Gimonet, and Didier's estate is in Cuy, Premier Cru in the northern part of the Côte de Blanc, but he has Grand Cru holdings in Cremant and Auger and other parts of the Côte de Blanc as well. So he's going to talk to us about his domain. And Didier, if you could talk a little bit about, for you, what the differences are between these different crus, I think that would be helpful.
Yes, good evening or good morning, I don't know. Yes, of course, I'm quite lucky growers because our domain is quite atypical because it's a large domain because we have 29 hectares in Côte de Blanc. As Gabe told you, part are in Premier Cru villages, mostly in Cuy. Cuy is the northern village of Côte de Blanc. And we have 3 Grand Cru villages, and mostly in Cremant and Chouilly in the north of Côte de Blanc, and Auger in the south of Côte de Blanc. Of course, we are very lucky, but we are very proud of this. And in fact, we really think when you are a small company, the most important is the origins of vineyards, because in fact, when you are like us, our philosophy is really to try to have the expression of terroir in our wines. And of course, it's very important for us to add qualities of different villages of Côte de Blanc to try to have more complexity and more diversity. On the 3 Grand Cru we have, my favorite is Cremant. I'm going to say, of course, but it's not, of course, for you. But in fact, Cremant, I think it is the best of them because we are really on a very chalky soil. And the expression of Cremant is always very feminine. That means it's a question also of texture. So texture for me is very important. That means it is what you feel in your mouth. That means it's always very airy, very lacy. What is lacy? Lacy, it is when it's rich, but very delicate. That means in the mouth, it's not only a question of power, but it's a question of harmony and balance. And it is why Cremant normally is reserved mostly for the premium cuvée. You can find it quite a lot in the cuvée Special Club, and also in other vintages cuvée as Florent or Gastronome. Then we have also Chouilly. Chouilly, it's a very important vineyard in Champagne because I think it's something between 500 or 600 hectares. Chouilly is also in the north of Côte de Blanc. That means for me it's also a feminine terroir. And in fact, you have a little bit less power in Chouilly, but Chouilly is always very salty in length. That means you have really in fact, that means you have always something very chalky in length, and in fact, you are always salivating. I love Chouilly. Of course, it's deeper in Cremant, but I love Chouilly because with Chouilly, you can elaborate the archetype of Blanc de Blanc. That means what people expect for Blanc de Blanc. That means something with a lot of harmony and also with a lot of freshness in length. It's very easy for drinking. Then we have sorry. Then we have a third Grand Cru. It's Auger. In fact, we have vineyards in Auger since 2005. And Auger is very different from Cramant and Chouilly because you are more in the south of Côte des Blancs. That means it is at the south of Avize. The vineyards, the vines are more in the circus. That means it's hotter than in Cramant and Chouilly. You have less wind, and that means we have great maturity. And generally, we have more power than in Cramant and Chouilly. So it seems for me more masculine. That means you have more power, and the minerality is very different. It's chalky, but it's more stony or graphite. And then, if I would like to speak about my origins, it is in the village of Cuy. Cuy is a premier cru. Cuy is the northern village of Côte des Blancs. In fact, Cuy have not the characteristic of Grand Cru villages because you have less power. But I think it is very interesting for Gimonnet because if you know that Chardonnay is more acidic than Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier, and if you know Chardonnay from Côte des Blancs is more acidic than other Chardonnay, you need to know also that Cuy is more acidic than the other villages of Côte des Blancs. That means when it is acidic, you need to manage the harvest to always pick the grape with maximum of aromatic ripeness because you have a lot of acidity, and the acidity means the freshness. And in fact, because we have nearly 15 hectares in the village of Cuy, of course, the non-vintage is elaborated only with this village, and you can find also a lot of Cuy premier, always a piece of Cuy premier cru in other cuvées, in vintages cuvées or in special club cuvées. And Cuy is a little bit the signature of Gimonnet. He adds the freshness to all the cuvées of Gimonnet. That's okay, Gabe? Perfect.
Would you say that the style of Gimonnet is connected to this freshness, to this character of Cuy?
Yes, because in fact, at the beginning, when my grandfather began in the 1920s, he had only vineyards in the village of Cuy. And in fact, the size of Gimonnet at the beginning was 100% from Cuy. So, of course, it was very fresh and crispy champagne. And during this century, we always try to keep this style. Of course, now we have a lot of Grand Cru because we have 13 hectares in Grand Cru villages. So we add more power on the style. But we think it is very interesting to keep the identity from Cuy, because with Cuy, we can elaborate Blanc de Blanc different from the others. That means we have always a lot of freshness and a lot of saltiness in length. And for us, it is very important. When you are a small company, it is very important to have a huge identity, so to produce, to elaborate wines different from the others. And because we have large location in Cuy, we try to produce Blanc de Blanc a little bit different from the other Blanc de Blanc. And after, but it's very complex to explain, because we have a very important knowledge of the terroir of Cuy. Since 1982, we have invented a process of elaboration of non-vintage by blending with reserve wines kept in bottles and not in tank. You know, when you have a lot of freshness, you would like to keep it. So all the reserve wines from the domain are kept in bottles with under carbonic gas. So you have less oxidation, and the lees produced by the fermentation support and fill the wine. So we have always a freshness of Cuy, but with more complexity or with more gentle style.
Excellent. And this is a very complicated process to explain to people because it's not very common in Champagne to use wine that's in bottle for reserves, correct?
Yeah, that's true. Because it's more difficult to elaborate, because you need two bottles and you need to reopen the bottles. imagine to produce a non-vintage cuvée, the non-vintage cuvée cuit premier cru, the production is approximately 140,000 bottles per year, and we need to reopen 50,000 bottles per year to re-include in the new non-vintage blend. So it's an important process, very important for us because it's part also of the style, and it costs more than if you keep in tanks. But you know, when you are a grower, you have a passion for the wines you would like to elaborate, and we think it is the solution for the style of Gimonnet. I can produce another non-vintage because I think it is the truth for the styles we expect.
Fantastic. Could you talk for just a minute about the special club, Didier, and
yes,
this wine?
So the special club cuvée, you know, the form of the bottle is a form specific for all producers who are in the club Trésor de Champagne, and there is rules to integrate this club, and of course you need to know that if you would like to bottle some wines in these bottles, you need to present still wines before bottling to have the agreement. And for each houses, the special club must represent the best of the domain. So in fact, it is the best selection of the domain. For us, it's very simple. We are located in Côte des Blancs. The best is Cramant. So the special club is a blend where we try to have the most elegance as possible. That means it is a selection of very old plots. When I say old, it's more than 50 years old. And we have always two plots in Cramant planted in 1911 and 1913. So the classic blend of Pierre Gimonnet Club, the name is Grand Terroir de Chardonnay. Generally, it's approximately 60% from Cramant, 30% from Chouilly, and 10% from Cuit. What we try to, what we would like to obtain, it is the most elegance as possible, and with a very important aging potential. So the Cramant give you the power, give you the depth of the cuvée. Chouilly give you the saltiness and what I like in the archetype of Blanc de Blanc, and Cuit, of course, is the signature of Gimonnet to add the freshness. So this is a classic vintage special club Gimonnet, and since 2012. I would like to play, so I also produce for the moment 3 other single villages, one pure Cramant, one pure Chouilly, one pure Auger, and that represents in fact the identity of each terroir I expect. So we can play. You can play with the special club Gimonnet. For the moment, you have 4 special clubs. And in the future, you will have 5 special clubs because since 2018, I elaborate also a special club 100% from Cuit.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Didier. If anybody has any questions for Didier, please chat in. We have our next grower who we're talking to, who also has some experience with this difficult process of bottles and putting them again through another fermentation. Rodolphe Peters has joined us from just south of where Didier is sitting in Le Mesnil-sur-Oger. Rodolphe, are you here?
Yes.
Oh, perfect.
Hey, Rodolphe.
Hello, Didier.
Bye-bye, Gabe. Thank you.
Bye-bye, Didier. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone.
Hello, Rodolphe. Thank you for joining us taking the time. So we talked kind of going from north, and now we're a little bit further south, where Rodolphe is sitting in his beautiful new tasting room in Le Mesnil-sur-Oger. So Rodolphe, could you talk just a little bit about the domain?
So as for Didier, we are a grower, so we operate also mostly our vineyard mostly in the Côte des Blancs. Slightly southern to Didier. Didier owns his vineyard from Auger to Chouilly, and we own our vineyard from Le Mesnil to Cramant. So grower for 6 generation and producer for 4 generation. We celebrated last year the centenary of the first vintage elaborated by my great-grandfather. And yes, as for Gimonet, Pierre Peters is really connected to the Chardonnay, to the Côte des Blancs, and yes, Blanc de Blanc Champagne is really our signature, while Didier is really imprinted by Chouilly. We are really imprinted by Le Mesnil-sur-Auger, which is the roots of the family and the most important part of our vineyard and most important part of any of our blends. What would you like to know? No, I just, if I may.
Yes, please.
I heard at the end of the speech of Didier, and I just would say that I will explain you probably opposite things to Didier, or
he's not here anymore.
Another point of view, but it doesn't mean he was true, I'm wrong, or I'm true, he was wrong. It just means that to be a good winemaker, I really feel like you need conviction, you need believe what you are doing and follow it 200%. It doesn't mean that, it just means there is not one true in terms of wine. It just means you have to make your vineyard your own vineyard, make your winemaking your own, and then follow your path and the path of your ancestors, your father, your grandfather, with great conviction. That's the sole way to make great wines. That doesn't mean one is right, the other one was wrong. And so once again, we own our vineyard in Le Mesnil, Auger, Avizan, and Cramant, and I heard that for Didier, Auger is very masculine. For me, oppositely, Auger is very feminine. If I have to describe, and some of the attenders knows the story. If I have to describe the 4 villages, I would describe them in an opposite way to Didier. It's not because it's south to the Côte des Blancs that the wine are more opulent and sunny. Inversely, I even think that Le Mesnil, which is the southern of the Grand Cru, is probably the tighter of the whole villages, except, I mean in Grand Cru, except Cuy. Cuy is certainly the fresher, the tighter, the more acidic of the whole villages of the Côte des Blancs. But Le Mesnil is certainly the more mineral, the more tight, the more salty, even almost iody of the whole Chardonnay of the Côte des Blancs. So I think it's some way the reputation of this village. I mean, not very friendly when young, but outstanding after 25 years. Just have to be passionate with Le Mesnil. Then Auger, as I told you, is not masculine for me. It's funny because it's certainly because of, we have the same description of the village. It's quite low, half amphitheater, protected against the wind. This situation warm up the terroir a little, very tiny soil, and that makes very sweet Chardonnay. I mean, not based on citrus, but mostly based on white fruit, even yellow fruit, and but never opulent as Aviz is opulent. It's more elegant and very about white flowers and white fruit. So that's the reason why, for me, Auger is mostly feminine. And I use Auger for his feminine face in my blends. Talking about Aviz, Avis for me, if you have to work from Avis for a blend, it will help to build the body and the richness and the generosity. So the first taste, middle of the taste, and yes, the opulence of the wine. I used to say it's in terms of season, it's the summer, full of very ripe citrus, orange, tangerine, and not so strong in minerality, probably a little masked by the opulence and the body of the wine, but it's definitively a rich terroir, builded very rich Chardonnay. And Cramant, I don't know if Didier described Cramant. For me, I like this village. I like the mineral of Cramant. It's very gentle, very creamy. If you compare the chalk from Le Ménil to the chalk of Cramant, Le Ménil has a very dry, broken chalk, building this very almost sharp minerality. Cramant has more big blocks and a little bit oily, and it makes the mineral more creamy, more gentle, very pleasant. It's very into the wine, but it's never sharp. It's really well integrated. And what is a special imprint of Cramant for me is I call that fall points. I mean spices, so sweet spices like cinnamon, like licorice, like saffron, but also sous-bois. So sous-bois means very humid element from the forest. Also, it can be dry. It can be humid or dry, depends. I like that. It's for me, like salt and pepper in a blend, the last touch. So if some of you knows l'Esprit, so the regular vintage of Pierre Peters is specially made of those 4 villages, a selection of 4 parcels from the 4 villages. And I really want to bring together the 4 seasons to try to blend a very harmonic, in balance wine.
And this is something that we've talked about before with you, the difference between mixing and blending, that each element has its own character that brings something different to the wine. And that when you make these blends, and even with the Cuvée de Reserve, the basic quote unquote non-vintage wine, that this aspect of blending is something that is unique to Champagne and also very important. Could you talk to us a little bit?
I think it's part of our DNA, certainly. I had not a customer, one of my partner, a French wine this afternoon. He was a sommelier in a 2 Michelin star restaurant before to become a rep. He sells to the restaurant, and he told me a very interesting thing today. He said, okay, you don't taste like a sommelier, not at all. I feel like a winemaker in Champagne doesn't taste to describe, it tastes to evaluate the balance, the body, the level of acidity, the texture, and what will be the ideal combination in between different wine to find an harmonic wine in terms of texture, in terms of structure, in terms of acidity, in terms of fat, in terms of body. And that's exactly what we try to figure out when we work on our blends. Exactly.
And this is even more complicated than in still wine production, because you have to wait for so long to figure out.
Well, we have to project. We have to figure out the wine in 10 years. That's also the reason why I guess it takes so long time to become a good blender. Yes. A good blender, meaning for me, a good blender is not to blend a single vineyard, single vintage. Single vineyard, single vintage is just a one shot. It's good, it's not so good. That's it. It's a single vintage, single vineyard. A good blender is a winemaker able to release a top non-vintage wine, whatever the vintage, whatever the year, for 20 years in a row. That is a good blender. That's really the point for me. You know, Gabe, that I pay a lot of attention to the cuvée de réserve. I don't want to say more than l'échantillon, but the cuvée de réserve is far more important and far more challenging to blend than l'échantillon. L'échantillon is a top vineyard. I blend it from I blend it, let's say, from it's a kind of cream of the cream, you know. I just keep max 50% the one from l'échantillon, from 3 different parcels. I have not a big pressure to release a very good one, whatever the vintage. But for the cuvée de réserve, that is another story. Clearly, I have to bring together almost a part of each of my parcels, each of my blocks, and to release a very good one year after year. I also catch some points explained by Didier, the very interesting way he stored the reserve wine, because let's say the secret of non-vintage wine is the reserve wine. Basically, to be able to release very good wine year after year, you need to work on a very good base of reserve wine. So it's a huge challenge to keep it in bottle, and I have a lot of respect for Didier to do that, because it's like crazy to do that. But once again, I don't really agree about the reason why or what he's looking for this process. He explained that he keeps more freshness. I would say I understand what it means, but for me, it's about the autolyse. In both cases, the key is to keep the one on the lees. You can keep it in vats, in big container, or in very small containers. In case of Didier, magnums. So not bottles, magnums. Both wine will age on the lees. The sole difference, if you are doing well, if you manage well, is let's say, the way of the autolytic evolution. In a bottle, the autolytic will be a little more reductive. I mean, more toast, and yes, more on the reduction. And I would say if you work from opulent wine, very fruity, that can make sense to try to balance that with reserve wine a little tighter and tight by the reduction. But if you work from very tight, very crispy, energetic wine, I feel as a blender, as a winemaker, that makes more sense to work on the reduction, but on the autolyse, I mean, but maybe with a little more soft character, creamy character, and you like buttery, fresh buttery, but also fresh almond, fresh hazelnuts, to balance a crispy character. And both, you know, Chouilly and Le Ménil have naturally this very energetic, crispy character. My feeling as a blender is that it's better for Le Ménil to be blended from micro-oxidated autolytic reserve wine than very reductive autolytic reserve wine. That's my feeling as a winemaker, but once again, there is no through in terms of blend, in terms of wine. We all work from our own raw material. I can't compare the vineyard of my neighbor. I can't compare also the vegetal material of my neighbor. Each year we start from scratch we all start from a specific vintage, specific raw material, and we try our best with our conviction once again. But about the Cuvée de Réserve, I really work this one and make this one evolve with this philosophy. I mean, to keep all the energy, the freshness of Le Ménil in the young part of the wine, represented 50% of the blend, and all the best of the noble autolytic character in the reserve, going back to 1988, by the way, because the Cuvée de Réserve is always a perpetual process. I mean, we blend, then we keep 50% of the blend for the next blend, for the next year. So it's really a perpetual system.
And this is something that you have said before, that it was the most important thing for you to work on, to improve when you came to the domain. That this has been a passion project. Yes,
I'm very aware. This Cuvée de Réserve is the flagship of Pierre Peters. Is a very important one for our success worldwide. Also because as for Didier, we are quite important growers, so we are able to release, let's say, a serious quantity. We are not talking about 12 bottles, or no, we can release wine, we can show this wine on the market, and it means that we can be drink quite easily by the champagne lovers. So I know that first bottles a champagne lover will buy from Peters is the Cuvée de Réserve. I don't want him to be disappointed. He will never buy Chétillon if he is disappointed by the Cuvée de Réserve. So Cuvée de Réserve must be. My goal is to make a benchmark Blanc de Blanc, that the Cuvée de Réserve remain a benchmark grower. For sure, I don't fight against Ruinart, not at all. I have not this ambition to fight against Blanc de Blanc Ruinart. No, I mean, as a grower champagne, I really want the Cuvée de Réserve to be among the benchmark wine.
And it certainly is. I think we can all say that now, for sure. Rodolphe, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Giselle has asked a little bit about the Rosé de Miraval champagne, but maybe we'll leave that for another time and
another time, another day.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for joining us, guys. We appreciate it.
All my best to you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Nicolas, we are joined by now. Nicolas Chiquet. Nicolas, are you here?
No connection.
Yes,
in Mardeuil.
There he is. Okay.
Can you see me now?
Yes, we can see you perfectly.
Good.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nicolas, for joining us. I'm just going to go back to the map for a moment to show everybody in relation to where the three first growers we talked about were located and where we are now. So very briefly, we were talking about the Côte de Blanc here. We saw Glavier and Cremant, Gimonet and Cuy, and then down here in the south, Pierre Peters in Le Ménil. And now we're moving north. So these are east-facing set of hillsides. And now we're in the Marne Valley, and this is the Grand Valley de la Marne. So like the kind of, as Rodolphe said earlier, the creme de la creme, the premier crus and grand crus of this region. The Valley de la Marne is very large, but this section is a small subsection of the valley. So we're talking about south-facing hillsides and mostly more red fruit, so more Pinot Noir and more Meunier, although there is wonderful Chardonnay planted in the Marne, and Nicolas makes a wonderful Blanc de Blanc d'Ailly from this wine. So Nicolas, could you tell us?
Salut Rodolphe. Belle présentation.
Can you talk a little bit about your domain and
yes.
what you do?
So, as you say, Gaston Chiquet is located in Dizy. Gaston Chiquet was our grandfather. He created the brand in 1945, and he was already concentrated on the terroir, and we didn't change. Today, we work on about 23 hectares of vineyards, mainly located in the north side of the Marne Valley. In fact, Nolay behind me, with south exposition. So we get a lot of sun, a lot of fruitness. So, like said Rudolph at the end, what I heard, we adapt the vinification to the land. So you can see probably tonight that we have a lot of different style of vinification, but the point is that we adapt compared to what we get, where are our lands. We're having still some Meunier on the estate, but it's not anymore dominant, as you said, because we're having a lot of Chardonnay. So it's about 55% of Chardonnay now, 20% of Pinot Noir, and 25% of Meunier. So we try to really to show this terroir. In fact, we make parcel vinification. The point is to separate as much as we can the different land. We use small press. One yeast selected. It could be different point of view, but us, it's only one yeast, the same since the 70s. So like that, we are really concentrated again on the land, on the terroir. We use only stainless steel tanks because with the south exposition we get a lot of sun, we have a lot of oxidation already on the fruit. So to keep the elegance, we want to stop the oxygen in the wine, not too much. For that, stainless steel is much more adept than oak for us again. The wine that we will present tonight, the non-vintage, I heard Rodolphe speaking about reserved wine, is really important. We use 20% of reserved wine for the Tradition, Premier Cru non-vintage, which is a blend of 40% Meunier, still high percentage, 35% of Chardonnay. So the Meunier is bringing a lot of roundness, make the wine pretty much easy. The Chardonnay is bringing elegance, freshness, and we use 25% of Pinot Noir to bring more structure, to give more character. But the 20% of reserved wine could be 30, could be 10, compared to the style of the harvest, in fact. So tonight it's the base 14 harvest with 20% of reserved wine from 2013. And the dosage is probably 6 grams by liter if it's a degorgement from November, I think. So it's the wine which is really representing the estate since our grandfather. We continue with not the same blend, with little less Meunier than before because of the evolution of weather. We're having less Meunier on the estate, which is getting too much maturity where we are located. We're having more Chardonnay now. So for the second wine, we will speak about the vintage or Premier Cru. It's a vintage where we try to show the most powerful Pinot Noir that we can get where we are located. So it's interesting because all of the difference you will taste will be only due to the terroir. Vinification is exactly the same, but it will be the Tradition, the vintage, the Blanc de Blanc d'Ailly, the Special Club, same yeast, same tanks, just the blend are making the cuvée differently. So the vintage or Premier Cru is a blend of 60% Pinot Noir, 40% Chardonnay. It's always of Pinot Noir from different land. It's a mix here on Haut-Villers, on Dizy for the Pinot Noir. And the Chardonnay is a mix of Dizy on Hailly, on Haut-Villers, if I remember well. The dosage is 6 grams by liter too, and it was probably degorged in November 19. It's pretty easy to remember.
Nicolas, for just a question, when you're talking about the production of these cuvées, when you're getting into the vintage wines, do you use the same parcels every year, or does it vary based on the quality of the year?
No, it's having evolution. In fact, the Meunier are going mainly in the Tradition, so there is not in the vintage. For vintage, we have some nice Pinot Noir on Haut-Villers. It's really depending on the year. For example, for 2020, the Haut-Villers Pinot Noir was getting the most maturity we could get, and we decided to make on half of it, the red wine over year, because we need more maturity. So it's really changing every year. Sometimes the red wine is coming from Mareuil-sur-Aille, sometimes some from Dizy, not anymore Ailly, because for the moment we do not have Pinot Noir on Ailly. So it's always changing. We can't know. It's really depending of the quality of the harvest, of course. So it's why we need to separate as much as we can at the harvest, because until we will taste the wine, we don't know the potential. It's really difficult to, it's not difficult, it's a bet to decide at the harvest. So it's why the blend is still very important. It's what we think.
And for the special club, are you using this? You're using the same method. So sometimes the parcel comes from one place and sometimes another, depending on the year.
Sometimes another. Yeah, it could be very different. We have an example for the Special Club 11 that we taste tonight. 70% Chardonnay, 30% Pinot Noir, which is amazing. If I remember, yes, there is a part of Blanc de Blanc d'Ailly in the Special Club 11, which is usually not what we use for the Special Club, because Blanc de Blanc d'Ailly is very fruity, very strong, powerful. And for the club, we wish more elegance. But we added a blend of a land parcel named Frère Martin, which is the less well exposed in Ailly, but it's often used in the vintage because it's bringing freshness and lightness to the blend. So a small part of it could be very interesting. And normally when you see the land, you think, no, not this one for the land, for vintage. So it's always having a lot of variation. We don't know yet what we'll use today for the Special Club, except perhaps for the parcel one. But
and in the vineyards you're using, even for, you know, in Premier Cru or in Grand Cru in Ailly, for Chardonnay and for Pinot, you're using the same kind of viticulture. There's a question from Elizabeth about cover crops, whether you're using cover crops in your vineyards, and
yes,
if you are, is it related to frost, or what's the reason?
The way we use the cover crops is really depending of the age of the vines, but now it's not everywhere. It's the cover crops. It's the easiest way, probably the best way to replace the RBC that we don't use anymore. But for example, which is more difficult to use, it's to have some grass in the plant, in the vines, because that is making a lot of competition. So that is really more depending of different parcel. But yes, we have to clean the grass with machines everywhere. It's really the pressure we have, it's having effect on the wine at the end, because it's making smaller production, so it's making more concentrated wine. So it's all of that is going together. It's one step is progressively giving some effect on the wine at the end. Always. I hope I answered well to the question.
No, perfect. Is there anything that you are doing now that you weren't doing 10 years ago, because of the changing climate and because of the warming vintages that you've had to deal with? Yes,
I started to say that at the beginning. We have less Meunier and much more Chardonnay, and it's the evolution. Pinot Noir and Chardonnay it's easier to support for them the warming weather. We get more maturity. We have enough production on these grapes to keep balance. With the Meunier, it's difficult because we have to pick up them very early. And it's always very complicated technically to organize an harvest for one day for 1 or 2 vines of a Meunier, because the wine will wait. You do not have the good conditions to make the vinification. It's not easy. In fact, we try to find the best balance by making a good organization of picking the grapes, like we have done this year. In fact, we stopped to work during a weekend to be able to make the Meunier first, really at the beginning, the Pinot Noir at the middle, some at the end for red wine, and mainly the Chardonnay at the end. And especially on Ailly, we pick up the Chardonnay grapes really at the end. It's happening more and more often that we start this way. So about 2020 harvest, if you want to speak about, yes, we are very optimistic. I'm pretty sure, like everybody, in Champagne, because we had wonderful maturity. It was necessary to wait, like I said, for the Chardonnay. We had few rain before the harvest, which helped a lot the vegetation to grow, and it made in fact the good balance of a fruity taste that we wished, especially for Chardonnay from Mailly. So we are really optimistic for the future. Yes.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Nicolas. Thank you for joining us. And if
Welcome.
anyone has any questions for Nicolas, please use the chat and let us know. We're going to move down the road from Nicolas to Marois-Railly and talk to Jean-Paul Ebrard. Jean-Paul, are you here?
Nicolas, I'm ready, Gabe.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Jean-Paul?
Oui.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's get started.
Hi.
Hello, welcome. Thank you very much.
Hi, Champagne lovers. Welcome to Mareuil. My family domain started in 1962 by my father, Marc. The domain was very small, and I took over the domain in 1998. I bought a lot of new parcels in the top terroirs, and now I have the domain is 15 hectares in 5 Grands Crus, Voiry, Chouilly, Avize in Côte des Blancs, Ailly and Louvois for the Pinot Noir, and 6 Premiers Crus, Mareuil-sur-Ailly, 8 hectares in Mareuil-sur-Ailly, Bisseuil, Avenay-Val d'Or, Dizy, and Auvillers. On the domain, I have 70% Pinot Noir and 30% Chardonnay grapes.
And this video that we're showing in the background is from last year's harvest, 2019. Could you tell us a little bit about the current Cuvée de Reserve and selection and the years that we're tasting now?
Yes, I can think about the mes favorites. Mes favorites is only it's a cuvée only with grapes from the village Mareuil-sur-Ailly. In selection Massal, it's all wines between 40, 65 years old. This wine was bottling in April 15, 3 years blend, 14, 13, and 12. And the blend is 75% Pinot and 25% Chardonnay. I practice the malolactic process. This wine is very fruity and elegant. It's the style of Mareuil, like the house style.
So you have a lot of holdings in Mareuil. Can you, I know that people often ask this question, and it's something that I think would be helpful to hear from you. When you're talking about Ailly, which you have a nice, beautiful holdings in, and Mareuil, for you, what's the difference in flavor of wine between those two?
Ailly has more body than Mareuil. You can see the subsoil we have in Mareuil-sur-Ailly, and Mareuil-sur-Ailly is located at the beginning of the Marne Valley, and maybe it's more the terroir is more open, and the maturity is earlier in Ailly than Mareuil. 2-3 days the difference.
At your family domain, you are a member of the special club. Can you talk to us a little bit about the parcels that go into the special club? Because you seem to have a different philosophy than Nicolas. It seems like in your special club, often there are specific parcels that go into the club.
Yes, if I want to compare the vintage, I need to blend the same parcels every year, and around 60% Pinot and 40% Chardonnay grapes. And if you don't blend the same villages, the same parcel every year, you can't compare the vintage. For me, it's very important to have the signature of the year.
And Sorry, and you've over the last few years, you've also got some new parcels in IE and these other areas. When you're getting these parcels, what are you looking for?
Yes, for example, for the Special Club 2015, I blend for 15 IE and Louvois for the Pinot, and the Marais-sur-Ailly and Chouilly for the Chardonnay grapes. Is the first time I add Louvois in the blend for the Special Club. I bought the parcels 4 years ago, and I decided to add Louvois in the Special Club cuvée because it's all wines and the quality is very, very interesting for the Special Club.
When you're talking about your wines, the flavor of the wines of Champagne Market Brar, what do you think of? What are the sensations or the taste that you think of when you think of describing your wines?
My idea is to produce the wine with a lot of fruit, but with a very nice final, very fresh final. And I love to blend a large part of Pinot and minimum 20-25% Chardonnay grapes for the freshness. I love the balance in the wines I can produce.
And you took over this domain from your father, and you have a son who's working in Champagne also, right?
Yes, maybe we'll continue the story. We need to wait 2-3 years more, but we hope Guillaume come on the domain to work with us. It's a great motivation. And
this last year, he was working with in Avis, correct, at Solos?
Yes, and now he's in the Rhône Valley for 3 weeks to Graillot, to the domain Graillot. And maybe it's very interesting for him to learn something different and to see the other vinification in red wine and to discover a lot of things.
And to bring some wine home to you and Issa.
Yes.
When you're pressing, this is something that we talk about often. The pressing that you do, you're using a different level of pressure for entry-level wines and then to the vintage wines. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about pressing at your domain?
Yes, the pressing system is very, very, very important to determine the level of the quality. You need to produce the top wines and the vintage. You need to use only the first press, the cuvée. But if you want to be better, you can use only the cœur de cuvée. For me, it can be 12 hectoliters for 4,000 kilos or 15 hectoliters for 4,000 kilos.
And so in the wines that you're producing, you're taking this and you're using different fermentation for different wines, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Can you talk about fermentation and when you're using steel and when you're using oak?
Yes, I use oak for 2 cuvées, the cuvée Rive Gauche Rive Droite and the cuvée Clos Le Léon. For the Rive Gauche Rive Droite, it's oak with malolactic, with no filtration. For Clos de Léon, it's oak vinification with indigene yeast and no malolactic process. And for the rest, it's stainless steel tanks with regulation at around 16 degrees for the process. And for the standard cuvée, I practice the malolactic process.
And in the vineyards, you have these new parcels, and you talked a little bit about changing the viticulture. Are you shifting things because of climate change in the vineyards? Are you changing the way that you're producing grapes?
Yes, the maturity in Champagne is easier every year, and we need to adapt the process for the vinification. We need to choose the very good date for the harvest. It's not so easy. Maybe the window for the harvest can be 8-10 days. The idea is to harvest the grapes when we have good maturity, but when we have a very nice acidity, to have the good balance in final after the vinification. This year, the harvest was so nice, and the Pinot Noir maturity of the Pinot, it was extra mature, very, very dense, very concentrated, and the Chardonnay was perfect. You can see grapes of Chardonnay. Maybe I expect a very nice vintage 2020. We need to wait the end of the vinification to have the exact idea about the quality, but the grapes was perfect during the harvest.
And is there another vintage that you would compare 2020 to?
For the maturity, maybe 19 was very mature and with the same density and the balance. But we need to wait to test the still wine to compare exactly the quality.
Excellent. The when you're talking about the you've said that you're adjusting the viticulture and that you're thinking about moving more towards organic viticulture. Could you talk a little bit about that?
About the organic viticulture, maybe I will start to grow the grapes with organic viticulture in one parcel. The size of the parcels is around 1 hectare, and I decided for next year to test the organic viticulture, but it's not so. You need to have a big parcels to practice organic. It makes sense. For me, it's very. I have 15 hectares, 80 different parcels, and a lot of very small parcels, and it's very difficult to work in an organic way when you have only 4 lines around the terroirs.
Because you're so close to your neighbors and they're spraying different things, so hard to get a clear result.
You need to remember the climate in Champagne can be very nice, like this year, or can be very difficult, like 2018 or 16. It's rained all the time, and it's not so easy to produce top grapes. The idea is to produce the top grapes to put in the press, and after it's very easy for the vinification. And sometimes you need to use some to protect the grapes.
And is this something that Guillaume, that your son is also interested in continuing, or is it too early to tell?
Maybe Guillaume will change a lot of things on the domain. The new generation have a lot of new ideas, but for me, I prefer to produce top grapes to produce great wines after. It's very easy.
One of the things that we talked about in some of the other conversations with the other growers briefly is about longevity, how long the different wines can age. And we've tasted a number of older wines with you, Jean-Paul. And can you talk a little bit about what you like to drink when you're at home of champagne? Do you like young wine, older wine?
It depends of the moment. I can love fresh wine during summertime, and I can love old vintage during winter time for the complexity, for the maturity. I tested recently the Rive Gauche Rive Droite in Magnum 2004. It was a perfect balance. It was disgorged à la volée with no dosage, and it was very fresh, very complex and fresh.
Excellent.
It was the first release for this cuvée, and I was so happy to test it with maturity and with no dosage.
This was the first vintage, the 2004.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, for the Rive Gauche Rive Droite. Right.
And what was the first vintage at the Domain for Special Club?
We are member for the club since 1985. And the first vintage was for my father, 85.
Excellent. Excellent.
It's a long story.
It's a long story. And we have to say that the wines have just, over the time that we've been, I personally have been tasting them, they've always been a favorite, but they seem to get better and better every year. And one of the things that people have said in the past was that perhaps some of the wines had, were on the more fruity side. And you've recently released 3 different extra brut wines with a lower level of dosage. Could you talk about why you decided to release the selection, the Blanc de Blanc, and the Rosé with as extra brut?
Yes, for me, now the maturity in Champagne is better and better, and the wines are more intense with more body, and the dosage is like spices or like salt in for the cook, right? When you cooked, and it's for to find the exact balance. And maybe the extra brut is easier now to drink than before.
So it's a matter of the maturity of the grapes, the maturity of the ripeness of the vintage, and not
Yes.
because of your personal taste has changed, but because of the climate has changed.
Yes, the climate changed. It's very easy now to have a high maturity for the Pinot and for the Chardonnays than 30 years ago or than 20 years ago, and we need to adapt the dosage with the wines to find the good balance for the taste.
Excellent.
And on the domain I use for the dosage, the mou concentré, it's a sugar of the grapes. It's very neutral, and you can smell it for the dosage.
So you use MCR for everything.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes, it's a choice.
That's a choice. Well, thank you very much, Jean-Paul, for joining us. Really appreciate it. Wilfred asked if he heard correctly that you like to drink older wines in the wintertime. Is that correct?
Super.
Yes. Yeah. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Jean-Paul. And Laurent Champ is joining us now. Laurent, are you here?
Yes, you can hear me, Gabe?
Yes, perfect. We can't see you now.
I can see you too. It's a good thing.
We can't see you.
Okay. I'm with you. Okay, I know why. Just 2 seconds. Up. Okay, you can see me now.
Perfect.
Perfect.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
We're gonna because we're skipping we're moving north now, and we're going from Jean-Paul in Mareuil to Rilly-la-Montagne in the Grande Montagne, kind of towards the end. So just to kind of go back, we're in the Côte de Blanc here, and then we're in the Vallée de la Marne facing to the south. And then the Montagne kind of takes this turn. It's a horseshoe shaped kind of U that is facing east here, south in Bouzy and Ambonnay, and then actually facing north in Verzenay. And Villemar is here in Rilly-la-Montagne. But you have a very special situation and a special kind of exposition in this village, because much of the vineyards are facing north, but you actually have a lot of vineyards that are facing east and facing south. Is that correct?
Absolutely correct. I know you know well your subject, Gabe, because Villemar is a paradox. We are in a Pinot Noir and Meunier area for Rilly-la-Montagne, because normally you have 80% and only 20% of Chardonnay. But for Villemar, we are at the opposite ratio, because we own 70% Chardonnay and 30% Pinot Noir, which is a really high proportion of Chardonnay. And you told us just previously, because we are on a chalky soil, and 50% of our domain vineyards is south exposition, and the rest is mainly on east exposition, which is really unusual for Rilly-la-Montagne or this area. So this is why we have a higher proportion of Chardonnay. And maybe, which is very unusual too, for the size of our house, because we are a familial house since 1890, I have the pleasure to be the 5th generation. We should have 90 plots of vineyards, and we have only 12 plots, which is very, very small, but it means that we have a large parcel where we can farm exactly the concept we want. My father started in the 70s with a biodynamic philosophy, And now for myself, yes, you can see my father, my mother, my son, and my daughter. And now for 20 years, more than 20 years, because this is my birthday today, my anniversary, 25th anniversary, working for Villemar. And we are in high value of environment and viticulture durable, which means we don't use chemical feeding, just organic feedings, no herbicide, just plowing, and no insecticide, biologic methods like sexual confusion. And I try to use at the maximum contact product like sulfur and copper. So this is just for the vineyards. I have to be very precise because I know we have only 5 minutes for each topics. Correct, my friend?
You can speak. It's always wonderful to hear your perspective and about your domain. So please, I think we have some beautiful pictures that Abby is showing of really
Sure.
Montaña, and maybe you could talk a little bit as being the 5th generation about the domain from the viticulture side, but also in the cellar, you have a very different philosophy than many of the growers that we work with. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that too.
Yes, totally true. I think in the vineyards we are very close from all our friends you spoke and you have just interviewed. But for the domain, yes, it's really important. I think our philosophy, our aim is to make wine first and bubbles afterwards. And this comes from my father, the 4th generation. He came here in the 70s, 1968. And he was not a winemaker or wine grower, not at all. He was a carpenter, a man of the wood. He was a drawer, a very artistic man, in fact. And what he saw in 1970, it was maybe a turn in Champagne. It was one of the biggest harvests, a huge volume. We could maybe compare to 2018, and he saw that a lot of growers, a lot of big Champagne, they turn into stainless steel tank to big, very, very big volume. And he decided that to use exactly the opposite way. So he decided to buy large oak cask, the 5 first larger cask of the house. And maybe he has been considered maybe like a crazy guy, a fool, or but he started this philosophy and this winemaking. And our winemaking is to press on traditional coca press, vertical press, 4,000 kilograms. And we are still, since 1970, with the same press, this one, and everything per gravity, which means that we have a very slow extraction, low pressure extraction, no oxidation, because it's a static press. And we can extract all the grape juice. After 24 hours of natural decantation, after gravity running, I take each grape juice, cuvée, and second juice, we call tie, and put into larger casks for the future non-vintage, like for Grande Réserve or Grand Cellier. Or I put the very high level grape juice of the very old vines, 50, 60 years old, in barrels, 228 liters, pretty young barrels, normally 1 to 3 years old, for Grand Cellier d'Or, Cœur de Cuvée, Blanc de Blanc. And this is a winemaking for 10 months, which is pretty long in Champagne, because the classic way is only 3 to 4 months in stainless steel tank. I do 10 months in wood, because I think that the 2 main abilities maybe for a good wine grower or winemaker is patience and humility. Humility in front of or behind Mother Nature, first of all, because we can work only what she gives us, only that way. And she's the master, not us. And secondly, patient, because when we make wine, we start from a raw material, and it needs time to ferment, to age, in the barrel as a still wine, and after it has to age a long time on the lees. But we'll come back for that, I think, just after. So this is why. This is the fifth Enotech, number 5, not from Chanel, but from Vilmar. I have 5 Enotech at Vilmar House that you know, Gabe, and just to see how mature, how improve the wine through the time after 5, 10 years, 15 years, even 20 or 30 years after disgorgement. Because I keep all my Enotech bottle disgorged, just to see, like you, if you keep in your own cellar, how show the wine and the cuvée.
It's the time in your Vinotech has been really incredibly informative in understanding how your wines age. One of the things that I think helped me to understand the house style of Vilmar was visiting you and hearing you talk about not just the oak aging, but also the blocking of malolactic that you do at the house, because this maintains a very kind of strong structure of acidity as the backbone of the wine. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Of course, the wine is very complex. The champagne winemaking is complex too, and you need time to understand. Even me, after 25 years, sometimes I can be surprised. It's true that aging for 10 months in barrels before the bottling, we never do the malolactic fermentation. Just to keep the finesse, the freshness, and as you said, like the bone of the wine. And we keep this malic acid for the future structure of my wine. And this maybe allow me to get a wine pretty precise, mineral, but round and gourmand, because you have this micro-oxygenation from the wood, true, but it's underbalanced by the non-malolactic fermentation by keeping the high level of acidity. And it's very important to be very maybe wise and humble, because very good friend of mine says the wood is a good servant but a bad master, and you can't use just young wood just to give a strong taste or strong flavors. It doesn't work like this. You have to use it just like a servant, which means it helps you. It is just this for the micro-oxygenation, and it's in combination with this non-malolactic fermentation to keep the freshness, and plus the wood will be integrated during our lees maturation after the bottling, because I like to mature minimum for 2 years for the non-vintage, Grand Reserve, Grand Cellier, and 4 years for the Grand Cellier d'Or, 6 years for the Cœur de Cuvée, 7 years, sometimes 8 years for the Blanc de Blanc. So you see, it's like a kind of integration and combination all together.
Elizabeth is asking about blocking malolactic and what you use, and I think temperature plays a huge role in your cellar, which is very, very cold. But yes, maybe you could talk about that for a minute.
Sure. First of all, during the pressing process, everything per gravity, the grape juice go directly downstairs at around a temperature 15 degrees, which is pretty low for a grape juice. And just after that, I pump, 24 hours later, I pump the grape juice after the first racking into the large cask or barrels. And we are around 10 degrees of temperature, low temperature. And this, for the first alcoholic fermentation, is very important, because we have maybe 17, 18 degrees inside the barrels. So to keep the fruit and the original flavor, it's perfect under 20 degrees. And after, it allows us to have a regular, steadily temperature and first alcoholic fermentation. And when the first alcoholic fermentation is finished, 15 days, 20 days later, we top it up the barrels, and I let the still wine, the new still wine, at a very low temperature, around 12 degrees. And that, plus a natural low pH, I can give you an example for this year. I picked my Chardonnay around 11.2, 11.3 degrees natural, and we have pH 3, which is like a kind of perfect balance. And a low pH plus a low temperature prevent you malolactic fermentation starting, if I can say.
Excellent, thank you. I wanted to talk just for a minute about the two new wines that you have just released, the 2012 Rosé and the 2012 Cours de Cuvée. If you could talk maybe about the 2012 vintage, as you have two new wines that are just released from that vintage. What that vintage was like for you?
2012 is, of course, it's logical. It comes after 11. Maybe we'll talk about this challenging vintage. But 12 was certainly in Champagne, I can say, for the last 10 years, the highest and maybe most balanced maturity. And 12, maybe we had a winter and a spring pretty medium, a little bit rainy, but and even in the summer, but just after we had a nice August month and a perfect September month, and the maturity came with a nice balance between the sugar concentration and acid concentration. And it made that at a very, very high point. And I can remember we started on the 20th of September, pretty late if you compare to this year. And September, when you start on harvest around 20th of September, is pretty good, because it means that you have a longer period between your flowering to your picking date, which is really great. And plus, in 12, we had a high level of maturity. So it was pretty easy to press, to vinify, and just to wait, because now we are with a Cours de Cuvée with 8 years of winemaking. Cours de Cuvée with 80% Chardonnay, 20% Pinot Noir. So you see a pretty high proportion of Chardonnay, which gives still a freshness, a minerality, and 6 years on the lees, and 1 year of disgorgement. So today, when you open a bottle of Cours de Cuvée 12, you feel the finesse, the precision, and the freshness. And all the complexity is coming just after. And of course, we have now 1 year of disgorgement. We are just releasing it. But you can imagine in 6 months or even 1 year, with 2 years of disgorgement, it will become more complex, more intense, and maybe with a lot of, it will be a very vibrant wine. And
the Rosé Emotion, which
sure.
replaces the Grand Cellier Ruby, which I'm personally a huge fan of, and I know a lot of people who are listening also love that wine. So this is to replace the Grand Cellier Ruby in name.
Yes, in name, only because I was thinking we have the Grand Cellier, we have the Grand Cellier d'Or, and after Grand Cellier Ruby, so it was a little bit redondant, we say in French, a little bit maybe heavy, and I decided with my daughters 2 or 3 years ago to say, okay, maybe why not to find just a new name, maybe a new label, something just authentic. And we decided, okay, why not? We went on the parcelle, Les Rosiers, and we say, well, why not make maybe special drawing, painting about that, and maybe for the name, what gives us this wine? Just emotion. So we found something very simple, easy but true. So it's the Cuvée Emotion, and with a nice vintage, 12. So it's just the representation of the parcel, but it's more than that. I have always wanted to make a non-vintage rosé or a vintage rosé, something very delicate, precise, light and complex in the same time. I don't want a rosé too heavy, too strong. So this is why the Cuvée Emotion has a structure and a base of 60% of Pinot Noir for the fruit, the structure, the body. And it's very unusual in Champagne. I add just before the bottling 40% of Chardonnay still wine, which gives more elegance, maybe more spirit to the wine. And this combination of 60 Pinot Noir, 40 Chardonnay, for me gives a beautiful balance to this Cuvée Emotion. And it aged 6 years on the lees, more than 1.5 years of disgorgement, and now it tastes fresh, elegant, intense, and it's a beautiful cuvée to maybe just for aperitif to enjoy like that, or we like to do sometime after a good work of week, enjoy a tataki of salmon or tuna or sushi, tuna salmon, and you match with the Emotion 12. It's pretty good end of the week.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you very much, Laurent. If anyone has any other questions for Laurent, please chat in or speak up. But we want to say thank you very much to you, Laurent, for coming on and talking with us. It's always wonderful to hear your explanations. You have certainly a way with words, and thank you to everyone else who has joined and stuck around to listen. I think Laurent's presentation was well worth the wait. So thank you again. And if anyone has questions, just let us know. And I hope that we'll see you next week for next Tuesday, where we explore more of the Marne Valley, and your friend Cedric will be with Cedric Mousset, and the rest of the Montagne. So please do join us. And for those of you who joined late because of our technological hiccup, sincere apologies there. But thank you.
My pleasure, Gabe. Take care of you, and it's just for sharing wine and sharing just what we do. Thank you so much.
Cheers to that.
Cheers.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Gabe.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.